The summer my husband's nephew came to stay, we built something in our backyard. It started as a way to keep a 15-year-old boy off his phone, but it ended up becoming a sanctuary. And every time I look at it, I'm reminded of the memories we made that summer, the ones he'll never share with another soul. Not because they're shameful, but because they're sacred. They belong only to us. My husband Mark has a heart the size of a mountain. He's a good man, the kind who grills steaks to perfection and remembers your coffee order after hearing it once. His sister Sarah is different. Life has chipped away at her, leaving her sharp and frayed at the edges. So when her divorce from Leo's dad got particularly messy, it was Mark who suggested Leo, her only son, spend the summer with us. A change of scenery, he'd said. Some fresh air, no drama. I'd agreed, of course. I pictured a slightly awkward but ultimately fun summer, like having a temporary exchange student. I was not prepared for the ghost who walked through our front door. Leo arrived with a single duffel bag and a permanent scowl etched onto his face. He was all angles and limbs, a boy in the awkward throes of growing into a man, but he moved with the heavy slouch of someone much older. His phone was an extension of his hand, a glowing rectangle that he held between himself and the world like a shield. He'd answer questions with grunts, his eyes never leaving the screen. "How was the drive?" "Fine. You hungry?" "No, this is your room. We thought you'd like the—" He'd already dropped his bag and was face down on the bed, the blue light of his phone illuminating his sullen features. Mark tried his best, he really did. He'd drag out the old basketball, bouncing it on the driveway. "Come on, Leo, a little one-on-one?" Leo would just shake his head, not even looking up. Mark planned a fishing trip, bought new lures, packed a cooler. The morning of, Leo claimed he was sick. He wasn't. I saw him later that day, scrolling through social media, a ghost in the game room, untouched by the sunlight streaming through the windows. Mark's shoulders would slump, and he'd give me this look, a helpless shrug that said, "You don't know what to do." I didn't either. It was like trying to hug a cloud of smoke. The first 2 weeks were a masterclass in tension. Our house, usually filled with music and my chatter from the kitchen, was silent, punctuated only by the faint, tinny sounds of whatever game Leo was playing. I'd leave plates of sandwiches on the counter, and they'd disappear, but I never saw him eat. He was a phantom, leaving behind only the faint scent of teenage boy and a trail of empty soda cans. I felt a strange mix of pity and frustration. This wasn't just a moody teenager, this was a kid in pain. The divorce, I gathered from Mark's worried phone calls with his sister, was brutal. Custody battles, angry texts, using Leo as a messenger. He was a pawn in a war he never wanted to fight, and his retreat into the digital world was his only form of surrender. One night, around 2 a.m, I couldn't sleep. I went to the kitchen for a glass of water and found the back door slightly ajar. My heart did a little flutter of panic. I pushed it open quietly and stepped out onto the patio. And there he was. Leo was sitting on the edge of the lawn, his back to me, his phone finally dark and discarded on the grass beside him. He was just staring out into the darkness of our large backyard. He wasn't crying, but his whole posture screamed of a profound and bottomless sadness. I didn't say anything at first. I just walked over and sat on the grass a few feet away from him, hugging my knees to my chest. The night air was cool and smelled of cut grass and damp earth. Crickets chirped a steady, rhythmic song. For a long time, the only sound was that, and the distant hum of a highway. I could feel the tension radiating off him, a low-frequency hum of misery. "It's quiet out here," I finally said, my voice soft. He flinched, surprised. He hadn't heard me approach. He glanced at me, then quickly away, back towards the woods that lined our property. "Yeah, couldn't sleep?" He shook his head. A long silence stretched out. I was about to get up, to leave him to his solitude, when he spoke, his voice so low I almost missed it. "They're fighting again." "Your parents?" He nodded, picking at a blade of grass. "On the phone. My mom wants me to tell my dad something. I don't want to, I don't want to be the mailman." My heart broke for him, right there, in that quiet, dark backyard. What do you say to a boy who feels like a ghost in his own life? I could have offered platitudes. "It'll get better. They still love you." But they would have sounded hollow, like coins dropped in an empty well. So I didn't. I just sat with him in his pain. "You know," I said after another long moment, "when I was your age, my parents fought a lot too. Not a divorce, just loud. I used to hide in the closet. With a flashlight. I'd read books until my eyes burned, just to escape the noise." He turned his head slightly, a flicker of interest in his eyes for the first time. It was the first crack in the wall. Yeah? I read the entire E-Lord of the Ringsy trilogy in a hall closet. It smelled like mothballs and old shoes. I gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. But in there, with my little circle of light, I was in Middle-earth, not in a house that felt like it was shaking apart. He was quiet for a moment, processing this. Frodo had it easy, he mumbled. At least his quest was real. I knew what he meant. His quest was invisible, a war fought with silence and avoidance. Maybe, I said. But even Frodo needed a place to rest. A haven. The Rivendell of it all. He didn't say anything else, but when I finally went back inside, he was still there, staring into the dark. But his shoulders seemed a fraction less heavy. The next morning, for the first time, he made eye contact with me over the breakfast table. It was brief, a fleeting glance, but it was there. It was a start. That afternoon, I was in the garden, pulling weeds from a flower bed that had been neglected for too long. I was on my hands and knees, dirty and sweaty, and I was thinking about Leo, about his invisible quest. My eyes drifted to the far corner of our yard. Tucked behind a grove of old oak trees was the skeleton of a greenhouse. It had been there when we bought the house, a sad, dilapidated structure of broken glass panels and rusted metal frame. Mark had always talked about tearing it down, but we never had. It was just there, a forgotten monument to someone else's abandoned dream. And an idea, fragile and crazy, started to form in my mind. A quest, a haven, a Rivendell. I found Leo in the game room, controller in hand, the rapid-fire sounds of a digital battle filling the air. I stood in the doorway for a moment, not wanting to intrude. "Leo?" I said. He paused the game but didn't turn around. "Yeah? I have a proposition for you." I walked in and sat on the edge of the sofa, a careful distance away. "You see that old greenhouse in the back? The one that's falling apart?" He finally turned, a look of confusion on his face. "The junk pile?" "Exactly. I was thinking, what if we didn't tear it down? What if we brought it back to life?" He just stared at me. I could see the skepticism in his eyes. This was a boy who communicated in emojis and memes, and here I was, a woman in her 40s, talking about bringing a glass house back to life. I must have sounded insane. "I'm not talking about anything fancy," I rushed on, feeling a bit desperate. "I'm talking about a project, something for us to do. We could clear it out, replace the glass, make it a real greenhouse again. We could plant things, tomatoes, maybe some herbs. It would be work, hard work, but it would be ours, a place that's just ours." He was silent for a long time. The silence stretched, and I was sure he was about to laugh, or tell me to leave him alone. But then, he shrugged. A tiny, almost imperceptible movement. "Okay, just that, okay." It wasn't enthusiastic, it wasn't even hopeful, but it was a yes. It was a hand reaching out from the wreckage, and I grabbed it with both of mine. The next day, we started. Armed with thick gloves and a pair of heavy-duty clippers, we ventured into the jungle that had swallowed the greenhouse. The air was thick with the smell of decay and overgrown ivy. The first few days were brutal. We pulled weeds that were as thick as my wrist. We cleared out years of accumulated trash and debris. Leo was quiet, methodical. He didn't complain. He just worked, his face a mask of concentration, sweat beading on his forehead and dripping from his chin. He'd found a pair of old work boots in the garage, and they were caked in mud within an hour. There was a strange comfort in the labor. It was a problem you could solve with your own two hands. Pull a weed, and it's gone. Clear a patch of ground, and it's clear. It was the opposite of the messy, emotional chaos of his home life. We didn't talk much at first. The work was our language. I'd hand him a tool, he'd take it. He'd point to a particularly stubborn vine. I'd help him yank it free. We were a team. One afternoon, as we were wrestling with a tangled mass of thorny branches, I yelped as a thorn dug deep into my palm. "Ow, dang it!" I sat back on my heels, sucking at the small bead of blood. Leo stopped working immediately. He came over and knelt in front of me, his expression serious. He gently took my hand, his own rough and calloused from the work. "Let me see." He peered at my palm, his brow furrowed. "It's still in there." He pulled a small, sharp pocket knife from his pocket. I didn't even know he carried one. And with a steadiness that surprised me, he carefully, meticulously, worked the tip of the blade under the thorn and eased it out. It was a tiny thing, but the way he did it, with such focus and care, felt monumental. "There," he said, his voice soft. He pulled a dirty handkerchief from his back pocket and wrapped it around my hand. "You should be more careful, Clara." It was the first time he'd ever used my name. Not Mark's wife, not a grunt, but a Clara. And in that moment, kneeling in the dirt in the ruins of a forgotten greenhouse, I felt a shift. We weren't just two people working on a project anymore. We were partners. The work continued. We made trips to the hardware store, a place that had once been intimidating to me but became our shared playground. We'd wander the aisles, comparing prices of glass panels, arguing good-naturedly about the best kind of sealant. I taught him how to use a tape measure, how to read the markings, how to make sure things were level. He, in turn, showed me a video on his phone of a clever way to repurpose old wooden pallets into planter boxes. The phone was no longer just a shield, it was a tool, a bridge. The conversation started to flow more easily, woven into the rhythm of our work. We talked about music. He was into bands I'd never heard of, and I'd play him old classics from my high school days. He'd mock my taste, and I'd tease him about his. We talked about movies, about books, about the stupidest things we'd ever done. One day, while we were mixing concrete for a new foundation pad, he told me about his dad. Not the angry fighting dad, but the dad who used to take him camping when he was little. The one who taught him how to skip stones. "He's not a bad guy," Leo said, stirring the gray slurry with a shovel. "He's just angry all the time now. And my mom is too. It's like they forgot how to be anything else." "I'm sorry, Leo," I said, and I meant it. "It's not your fault." He shrugged, but it wasn't a dismissive shrug. It was a sad one. They don't see me. They see a piece of him, or a piece of her. They don't see just me. I understood then, with a clarity that was almost painful, what this greenhouse was. It was a place where he could just be Leo. Not Leo the son of Sarah, not Leo the son of David. Just Leo. A boy who was surprisingly good at measuring angles, and who had a quiet laugh that I was just beginning to discover. Mark would come home from work and find us out there, covered in dirt and grime, and he'd smile. He'd bring us cold drinks and ask about our progress. He was happy to see Leo engaged, to see him off the couch, but he didn't understand. He saw it as a chore, a way to kill time. He couldn't see the delicate architecture of trust we were building, panel by panel, conversation by conversation. He'd try to join in, offering helpful advice that was often wrong, and I'd see Leo's shoulders tense up. This was our space, our language. Mark, with his good intentions, was an outsider. One evening, a massive thunderstorm rolled in. We had just finished installing the last of the new glass panels. The greenhouse was almost complete, a beautiful, glittering jewel box in the fading light. We were inside, admiring our work, when the sky opened up. The rain came down in sheets, lashing against the new glass, and the wind howled through the trees. It was exhilarating. We were safe and dry inside our little glass house, watching the fury of the storm outside. "This is amazing," Leo said, his face pressed against a pane of glass, watching the lightning illuminate the backyard in brilliant, fleeting flashes. "It really is," I agreed. We stood there in comfortable silence for a while, just listening to the drumming of the rain on the roof. Then, he turned to me, his expression serious. "Clara, can I tell you something?" "Of course, you can tell me anything." He took a deep breath. "The night you found me outside, I wasn't just upset about my parents fighting." He hesitated, looking down at his muddy boots. "I'd been looking at stuff online about how to, make it stop." My blood ran cold. I put a hand on his shoulder, my heart pounding. "Leo, I wasn't going to," he said quickly, looking up at me, his eyes wide and pleading. "I swear, I was just looking. It felt like everything was so loud and so heavy, and I just wanted it to be quiet. But then you came out and sat with me, and you told me about the closet, and it was like someone turned down the volume. I couldn't speak. I just pulled him into a hug. He was stiff at first, then he relaxed, his head resting on my shoulder for just a second. It was the most vulnerable, the most precious, the most terrifying moment of my life. In that glass house, in the middle of a storm, he had given me his heaviest burden, and all I could do was hold him. "It's okay," I whispered, my voice thick with unshed tears. "It's okay to not be okay, Leo. You don't have to carry this alone. Not here, not with me." We didn't talk about it again after that. We didn't need to. It was now part of the foundation of our sanctuary, a secret buried deep in the concrete, a memory sealed within the glass walls. The work after that felt different. It was lighter. We laughed more. We'd work late into the twilight, the fireflies blinking around us like tiny floating stars. We'd share a bag of chips, or a pint of ice cream I'd smuggled out from the kitchen, eating it straight from the carton with 2 spoons. These were the memories, the quiet ones, the ones that don't photograph well. The feeling of a shared secret. The comfortable silence between two people who don't need to fill the air with words. The taste of mint chocolate chip ice cream eaten by the light of a headlamp in a structure you built with your own hands. We finished the project. We built planter boxes from the pallets Leo had found. We filled them with rich, dark soil. We planted tomatoes and cucumbers, basil and rosemary. We hung a string of solar-powered fairy lights inside. And at night, the greenhouse would glow like a captured star. It was beautiful. It was ours. The day before Leo was scheduled to go home, his mom, Sarah, came to pick him up a day early. She pulled into our driveway, looking tired and stressed, her phone pressed to her ear even as she got out of the car. She gave Mark a quick, distracted hug, then looked around for Leo. "He's out back," Mark said, pointing. We all walked towards the greenhouse. Leo was inside, watering the tomato plants, a look of intense concentration on his face. Sarah stopped a few feet away, her hands on her hips. "Well, I'll be damned," she said, her voice flat. "You actually got him to do something productive." The words were like a splash of cold water. She saw the structure, the plants, the boy. But she didn't see any of it. She didn't see the confidence in his posture. She didn't see the small, proud smile on his face as he inspected a new yellow blossom on one of the tomato vines. She didn't see the healing that had taken place in that little glass room. She just saw a chore that had been completed. "It's a greenhouse, Mom," Leo said, his voice quiet. He didn't turn around. "I can see that, sweetie," she said, already walking back towards the house. "Looks nice. Now go get your things. Your father is having a fit about the custody schedule again, and we need to get on the road." She didn't wait for him. She didn't step inside. She didn't ask him about it, about the work, about the summer. To her, it was just a backdrop. And in that moment, I understood the title of our story. These memories, the ones we'd made, were not for her. They were not for Mark. They were not for anyone else. They were too fragile, too personal, too sacred to be exposed to the harsh light of the world. They were forged in sweat and vulnerability and shared silence. They were a secret language spoken only by two people in a glass house. Leo came out a few minutes later, his duffel bag over his shoulder. He looked different, taller, more solid. The sullen mask was gone, replaced by a quiet calm. He said his goodbyes to Mark, a standard, awkward hug. Then he turned to me. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me, and in his eyes, I saw everything. The sadness, the hope, the gratitude. He reached into his pocket and pulled something out. It was a smooth gray stone from the garden, and on it, he had painted a tiny, detailed green sprout, pushing its way up through the dirt. He pressed it into my hand. "Thanks, Clara," he said. His voice was thick with emotion he would never show anyone else. "You're welcome, Leo," I said, my own voice threatening to break. "You take care of those plants, you hear me?" He nodded, a small, genuine smile touching his lips for the first time all summer. And then he was gone. I stood there for a long time after they left, the smooth painted stone clutched in my hand. Mark came up behind me and put his arm around my shoulders. "He seems better," he said. "I think the fresh air did him good." I leaned my head against his shoulder, looking at our little greenhouse glowing softly in the dusk. "Yeah," I said, "I think so too." He didn't know. He would never know. He wouldn't understand the story of the thorn, or the confession in the storm, or the taste of stolen ice cream. He wouldn't know about the boy who felt like a ghost, or the woman who hid in closets. He wouldn't know that we hadn't just built a greenhouse. We had built a refuge. We had built a memory. A beautiful, fragile, unforgettable memory that he will never, ever share.